In last video, we discussed about the Jupiter in the first house of your horoscope. In this video, we are going to talk about what happens when you have Saturn, yes, Saturn in the first house of your horoscope. So keep watching. Namaste and welcome to Vedic Astrology channel. I'm your host Prasad Mahazani. Help you raise your vibrations and become your true self with the help of Vedic Astrology. And if you're new to my channel, please consider subscribing. You will be getting Vedic astrological videos just like this one. These videos will help you go further, faster into Vedic astrological studies and become the best you. And if you are not following me on Instagram, this is my ID. Go follow me on Instagram. If you have any question, add me on Instagram at Pramanik Astrology. And if you are looking for readings and consultation, check out the link into the description section and go to the complete horoscope analysis of your horoscope, of your birth chart. So yes, today we are going to talk about Saturn in the first house. So what happens when you have Saturn in the first house? So what is the first house? First house we have discussed is the most physical and prominent house of your horoscope. The first house represents your personality. First house represents your face, your hair, and your orientation towards the life. And what happens when you have Saturn in the first house of your horoscope? What happens when you have Saturn in the first house of your horoscope? What is Saturn? Saturn is, I would say, a polar opposite to the Jupiter. Jupiter is the most benefic and the positive and optimistic planet, as we discussed into the previous video. Jupiter is expansion. Jupiter is benefic. Jupiter is all about the abundance, wealth, surplus, income, benefit. All these things can be seen from the Jupiter. And Saturn is the polar opposite to the Jupiter. Jupiter is extremely positive, Saturn is negative. Jupiter is about abundance, Saturn is about scarcity, is about the emotion of the lack. That something is lacking, that emotion of lack can be seen from the Saturn. Saturn is the restriction. Saturn is death. Saturn is your critical thinking. Saturn is your analytical skills. Saturn is very realistic planet. And now this planet is coming into your body, into your personality, into your orientation of life. What will happen? Now we have this conjunction of Saturn and the first house. Now what do you expect? What will happen into this conjunction? Have Saturn in the first house. The most prominent thing is this person is a very hard working. And why does he work hard? Because he is extremely practical and realistic. He is not at all optimistic like Jupiter. Jupiter is extremely positive. Jupiter has that faith to leap into the unknown. And Saturn is extremely cautious. Saturn is looking at things as it is. It is not looking at things which is, with the optimism or the faith. Saturn is an extremely practical planet. He looks at things as it is. He won't assume anything. He assumes nothing and he questions everything. So wherever you have Saturn placed in your chart, it is the area where you have to take the responsibility. It is the area where you might feel the fear. It is the area where you might feel restricted. And this is the lesson for your life. So when you have the Saturn in the first house, you feel restricted in your body. And this can mean you are not having a best of the health, or you may have the disabilities. Okay, so the restriction Saturn puts on you can be physical or it can be time bound. One of the biggest signification of the Saturn is that it is the significator for the time, the kala, that is the death. So Saturn restrict affects you with time. You get old, and when you get old, you become disabled. Okay, so when you have Saturn in the first house, it creates fear for the first house things. What is the first house thing? First house things is also about your confidence. So these people are always under the emotion of lack, which makes them practical and hardworking. You know, they know that they have to work, otherwise they are not going to make it. These guys are extremely determined. They have the hardworking, they have that hardworking approach, and they are also having that determination to keep going. You cannot beat the person with the sun, with the Saturn in the first house, with the determination. Mars also gives the determination, but the determination of the Saturn is a slow, and it is for longer period of time. Okay, so once they are convinced why they are doing it, they will keep doing it for 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. They are not worried about the repetitive actions, they will keep doing this. That is the strength of the Saturn. And now you have this Saturn into your first house, into your personality. So it makes you extremely hardworking and practical. The next signification of Saturn is the planet of the masses. Leaders are signified by Sun. So Sun is the leader, like a king, Mars is a soldier, and Saturn is the masses. And when you have a well placed Saturn in your chart, you might get the support from the masses. The people who sway the masses have a very well placed Saturn. Cannot influence the larger masses without you having a very good Saturn, because Saturn represents the masses. So when you have Saturn in the first house, it also aspects the third house of your horoscope. Third house is resonates very well with the Saturn. Saturn is a very hardworking planet, and the third house is also the house of your self effort, the parakram, and also the hobbies and the heart, the things which you follow. But even if they are following their heart and doing something creative, that it also has that glimpse of sadness and darkness into their creative art, into their creative project. You will see that yes, it's Saturn. So when you have Saturn in the first house, it also aspects the seventh house with its seventh aspect. So I'm not going to get married ever. No, it doesn't work like that. The first, when Saturn is aspecting the into the seventh house is the house of marriage. More so, it is also the bhavat bhavam for the 10th house. It is basically the house of the other person. Saturn gets the directional strength into the 7th house in the natural horoscope, because Saturn is exalted into the sign of Libra. So when we look at the Kalpurush Kundali or natural horoscope or Aries ascendant, it is one and the same. So when you look at the 7th house, it is the Libra, the sign of exaltation for the Saturn. Okay, so when the Saturn aspects from the first house onto the 7th house, it gives you a very disciplined, mature, and maybe an older partner. It gives a very loyal relationships. It might delay it, or uh, it might delay the marriages, but yes, the person with the Saturn in the first house will always marry a person who will help them get the status, or will help them get social status into the life. Okay, with the 10th aspect, Saturn is looking at the 10th house of the horoscope, and Saturn loves to be Saturn loves to work. Saturn will keep on working, he will never get bored of it. He likes to work, and 10th house is all about work. 10th house is the highest achievement of one's life. and you cannot have the highest achievements in your life without the permission of Saturn. Jupiter might bless you with everything, but the final and ultimate fruit of your karma is the 11th house, which is also ruled by Saturn. So 10th house and 11th house are both ruled by Saturn. And when you have Saturn in the first house, it is aspecting the 10th house. So these people have a very steady growth into their career. But yes, they will rise to the greatest heights into their sphere of influence when they have the first house Saturn. When you have Saturn in the first house, it also makes you ignorant about your appearances. The first house is your body, and the Saturn is all about, Saturn is not careful, Saturn is not conscious about the body. Saturn is a very serious and old guy. Have you ever observed the old people? They are not much interested into their appearances like a teenage boy or a girl. They'll be very obsessed with their looks, with their hairs, and how they look and what people think about them. No, 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 no. Saturn is an old guy. He does not give damn to what people think about him and what he is looking like. So most of the time it neglects the body. First of all, so as he is not conscious about health, there are probabilities that they might have health issues and they may not have the best appearances, but that won't stop them from going to the top of the ladder, because it is the first house Saturn aspecting the 10th and 7th house. So Saturn also likes to be alone. So when you have Saturn in the first house, the person is very comfortable when he is alone. He likes to be alone. When the Saturn is in the first house into the personality, the person feels that a person prefers to be alone most of the time. So he's very comfortable there. Nobody being around, he likes to be there. So when you have Saturn in the first house, the most prominent thing of his personality is pessimism. When you have Jupiter, it is all about the optimism. They like to accept new things because they are optimistic about the success. They like to explore the things. They like to go all out and experience new life. No, 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 no. The Saturn in the first house guy is very pessimistic. He does not like the surprise element. He likes the routine. Okay, but the strength of the Saturn is he is extremely critical. The people who always say that they don't believe in astrology, that astrology does not work, most of the time these are the people with the Saturn in the air element sign. They have the greatest of that critical ability to exactly pinpoint what they mean. They have that critical ability, which is like a scientist. They will dissect everything, will look at this, but the divine things cannot be experienced into the matter. It has to be experienced with emotion. So let us summarize what is Saturn in the first house. Saturn in the first house makes you conscious about the first house things. You have to carry out some responsibilities and duties with the first house things, and it can also lead to some fear around the first house things. But the strength of the Saturn in the first house is extremely hardworking, critical, and determined. If you can mold this with your other planetary alignments and your psyche, these guys can go longer. These guys can be one of the best critics who can really analyze things like no one else. They have the best analytical skills. They have the hardworking approach. They have the analytical skills. They are practical. Everything. If you can see this, how it is developing, it becomes like a very serious old guy who is very determined to achieve its goal, and he will. Okay, so yes, this was Saturn as much as I could hold, grasp and share with you guys. If you are new to my channel, please consider subscribing, hit that like button, subscribe if you aren't already, and sending you tons of positive energy, sending you high vibes. See you in the next videos. Love and peace.